Well, tomorrow, Wisconsinites will go to the polls to vote in a series of races. On every person's ballot, the race for state Supreme Court justice. Despite being nonpartisan, both the Democratic and Republican parties are funneling millions of dollars into each candidate's campaigns, making it the most expensive judicial race in American history. Earlier, Susan sat down for a one-on-one with the state Democratic Party chair, Ben Wickler, and I talked with the state GOP chair, Brian Schimming, and asked him the same questions. Well, Brian Schimming, thanks for being on with us today.
Great to be here.
Yeah, well, let's start with the basics. So both the state GOP and Democratic parties have endorsed candidates in the Supreme Court race, even though it's supposed to be nonpartisan. So why do you think Wisconsin Republicans are backing candidate Brad Schimmel in this race?
I think the truth of it is Brad, former Republican attorney general, but also just common sense judge, very, very effective attorney general. And there's a huge contrast between these two candidates. Brad Schimmel respects the Constitution, respects where the court's role is. It's not to be a second legislature, but to call balls and strikes. Whereas his opponent, Susan Crawford, is a very, very liberal, lenient judge, and we think that offers who thinks that they ought to legislate from the bench, and so we look forward to that contrast.
And there is a lot of interest in this race. Already this race has shattered spending records, and it's now the most expensive judicial race ever. So, of course, Democrats and Republicans have received millions in funding for this race, both of them, notably from both billionaire donors like George Soros and Elon Musk. Why do you think billionaires have taken such a big interest in this race? And is this just the way these races are now, getting huge donors, billionaire donors like these?
Well, these races are always getting more expensive. What's different on this race is that the left, the liberals in this state, have been taking tens of millions of dollars for years to fund state Supreme Court races. They're upset now because the other side is catching up. It's that simple.
And it does appear that people are paying a lot of attention to Elon Musk because he is an advisor to President Trump. And there's been some criticism of Elon Musk putting money into this race, especially with the potential a case of his could ultimately make its way before the Supreme Court justices. That's he and Tesla are suing to overturn a Wisconsin state law that prevents companies like Tesla from opening its own dealerships. So what is your response to that?
My response is the difference between these candidates is that Brad Schimmel knows enough to when to recuse from a case and to look at that issue fairly about whether he ought to recuse. Yet, on the other hand, Susan Crawford won't make those kind of assurances, especially in cases like voter ID or Governor Scott Walker's Act 10 reforms come up. So I think the difference is Brad Schimmel knows when to recuse. Susan Crawford does not.
So for voters who might worry that Musk is trying to buy this race for his own interests, you don't think Brad Schimmel can be bought?
No, I don't. I'm quite sure Brad Schimmel. I've known him personally for a long time. His integrity is important to him, and that's the reputation he has. Frankly, it's part of the reason why you look at current endorsements from sheriffs and past sheriffs. 80 current sheriffs and past sheriffs have endorsed Brad Schimmel, only one for Susan Crawford. That ought to send voters a message.
Finally, what do you think is at stake from the Republicans' perspective in this election? And do you think that this election could be a litmus test to see how Wisconsin voters are feeling about national politics as well?
Yeah, I never put a lot into litmus test and off-year elections because polling goes back and forth, and so there's, very seldom a direct correlation, or at least that I've seen over the years, between off-year elections. So that's pretty hard to say. But I will say that, all the attention to Wisconsin is largely because the Democrats and the left wing has nationalized the race, and they did that by openly talking about how throwing out 2 Republican congressional seats in Wisconsin is their goal. They had a call a couple of months ago where the state chair of the Democratic Party was on the call with Susan Crawford talking about that. And then just in the last several days, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat minority leader in the House, openly admitted that that was what it was about. So they've nationalized the race. As a result, a lot of resources come in. So what happens in Wisconsin on Tuesday will not stay in Wisconsin.
Brian Schimming, thank you for being on with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And you can watch our interviews with both state party chairs on our website, channel3000.com.
And that's where you'll also find all of our pre-election coverage, including political reporter Will Keneally's interviews with the Supreme Court candidates themselves.